Hello guys. Welcome to the story world. We are to serve you best stories, but we need your help to complete our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So find the subscribe button and please click on it. Let's jumping into story. The rain was relentless that night. Not the gentle, romantic drizzle Emily Carter had imagined when she pictured London in winter, but a cold, slicing rain that rattled on the cab roof like handfuls of thrown pebbles. The windows were fogged from the inside, and every so often the orange glow of a street lamp smeared into a dull halo in the glass before sliding away into darkness again. Emily leaned her forehead against the window. The glass was cool, and she felt the vibration of the engine through her skin. She had been awake for nearly 24 hours between the flight, the wait at Heathrow, and the slow crawl of traffic through the city. Ryan sat next to her, earbuds in, staring at his phone with the blue light washing over his face. He hadn't said much since they landed, only the occasional comment about how tired he was or how much longer it would be until they got there. When the driver finally turned off the main road, the tires crunching over wet gravel, Emily sat up straighter. There it was, Rose Hill Manor Hotel. It rose from the mist like something half-forgotten, an old Victorian estate wrapped in dark ivy. The stone walls were blackened with age and rain, and dozens of narrow, pointed windows glimmered faintly in the light from wrought iron lanterns along the drive. At the very top, a row of steep gables cut into the night sky like jagged teeth. Even in the cold rain, the place had a certain storybook grandeur. Emily had chosen it because it looked authentically British, a romantic place for them to reset. Maybe repair. The cab pulled under a covered stone archway, its ceiling carved with curling vines and roses that had long since dulled under decades of soot. The driver got their bags from the boot, and Emily handed over a few bills while Ryan was already halfway inside. The lobby was warmer than she expected, not just in temperature, but in tone. Golden lamplight spilled across wood-paneled walls, and a massive stone fireplace roared with orange flames. Overstuffed armchairs in deep burgundy sat clustered near the fire, and an elderly couple sipped tea there in comfortable silence. The air smelled faintly of polished oak and something floral, lavender perhaps. Emily's eyes roamed upward. The ceiling was vaulted, the beams dark with age, and at the far end stood a grand staircase with a runner rug so worn in the center it looked like a ghost of footsteps past. She felt for a brief moment the kind of awe she had always associated with travel. That heady mix of excitement and possibility. It lasted until they reached the front desk. The clerk was a young man, maybe in his late 20s, but pale enough that the lamplight made him look almost sickly. His hair was neatly combed, his uniform pressed, yet there was something about him that didn't quite fit. Like he was an actor standing in the wrong scene. "Good evening," he said, voice low. His accent was crisp, clipped. "Reservation for?" "Carter," Ryan said, stepping forward. "Ryan Blake and Emily Carter." The clerk typed something into the old-fashioned computer, the keys clicking with sharp, deliberate taps. His eyes flicked over the screen, then paused. His expression didn't change, but there was the faintest hesitation, the smallest twitch of muscle in his jaw. "Room," he trailed off, the corner of his mouth tightening almost imperceptibly. 13. Emily's brows rose. "That's unlucky, isn't it?" The young man's gaze flicked to her just for a second, then back to the screen. "We don't generally offer that one." "Why not?" she asked, smiling faintly. "Ghosts?" There was no smile in return. "It's at the end of the corridor. Very quiet." Ryan gave a tired shrug. "Sounds fine. We'll take it." The clerk's eyes lingered on Emily again before he reached under the desk and pulled out a brass key attached to a leather tag embossed with the number 13. He placed it on the counter, his hand retreating as though he didn't want to touch hers. "Enjoy your stay," he said softly. "And keep the balcony doors locked at night. Drafts." Emily took the key, frowning at the odd advice. The walk to their room felt longer than it should have been. The carpet runner down the hallway was patterned with faded roses, the red muted to a deep rust over years of wear. Oil portraits of unsmiling men and women in Victorian dress stared down from the walls, their eyes catching the light in ways that made Emily look twice. The sconces flickered occasionally, not enough to be alarming, but enough to feel noticed. Every so often, they passed another guest, but only in the first half of the hall. Past room 10, the corridor seemed empty. The air grew cooler, the faint hum of the building's central heating seemed to fade, and the soft scent of lavender polish was replaced with something drier, older. At the very end, a heavy wooden door waited. Its brass 13 gleamed brighter than any of the other numbers they had passed. The shine looked fresh. The metal caught the lamplight in a way that felt deliberate, like it wanted to be noticed. Emily slid the key into the lock. It resisted, then clicked with a weighty sound. The door opened inward, releasing a rush of cool, stale air. The room was larger than she expected. A four-poster bed draped with heavy crimson fabric dominated the space, and a matching armchair sat in one corner near a small table with a single lamp. A tall wardrobe stood against the far wall beside the balcony doors, which were covered by long, dark curtains. The carpet was thick, though a shade darker near the center, as if worn by years of footsteps. Ryan tossed his bag on the bed and flopped down beside it, sighing. Finally. Emily wandered the room. The wallpaper, deep cream with gold trim, was peeling slightly near the corners. The air had that faintly closed-off smell, like a room that hadn't been aired out in a while. She brushed her fingers over the desk near the window, finding a faint layer of dust. Curious, she drew the curtains open. The balcony overlooked the street below, the rain still falling in silver sheets. Across the way, dim yellow streetlights glowed through the fog, and beyond them the outline of dark rooftops and chimneys. When she tried the handle, it didn't turn. Locked, just as the clerk had said. Ryan was already scrolling on his phone, one leg bouncing absently. Emily let the curtains fall back into place and sat at the foot of the bed, glancing toward the wardrobe. It was taller than she was, its surface polished to a high shine. She thought she heard something, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like fabric shifting inside. She froze, listening. Nothing, but as she turned away, she could have sworn she saw, just for a second, a pale reflection in the wardrobe's mirror that didn't quite match her movement, and that was when the floorboard under her feet creaked, slowly, like someone was standing behind her. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but the streets outside were still slick and black when Emily opened her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The heavy curtains blocked the daylight, and the silence felt thick, the kind of silence you only got in a place with walls too old to let sound through. The air smelled faintly of damp fabric and old wood. Ryan was still asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even. She lay still, staring at the carved canopy above the bed, tracing the edges of the dark wood with her eyes. Something about the quiet was oppressive, as though it wasn't just the absence of sound, but the presence of something else. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet sinking into the thick carpet. It felt colder than she expected. When she crossed the room toward the desk, she noticed it again. The wardrobe door was open just a fraction. She was certain she had closed it the night before. Inside, her clothes hung neatly on one side, Ryan's on the other. But a third hanger, one neither of them had brought, swayed ever so slightly, as if it had been disturbed moments ago. She reached out and stilled it with her hand. The wood was icy under her fingertips. They spent most of the morning walking along the Thames, the cold air biting at their cheeks. Emily had suggested visiting the Tower of London, and Ryan had agreed, though his eyes kept drifting to his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. He was jumpy. Or maybe she was imagining it. They stopped for coffee in a narrow side street, the cafe warm and crowded. Emily sipped hers slowly, watching the condensation form on the window. "You've been quiet," she said finally. Ryan looked up from his phone. "Just tired." "You've been just tired since we got here." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Travel takes it out of me, you know that." She nodded, but inside something tightened. That feeling, the one she had hoped to leave behind in Boston, was creeping back in. The sense that she was losing him, that his mind was somewhere else entirely. When they returned to Rose Hill Manor in the late afternoon, the light outside was already dimming. The lobby's golden glow felt almost too warm compared to the chill in the air. The elevator was slow, the kind that shuddered slightly between floors. Emily leaned against the brass railing, watching the numbers tick upward. When they reached the top floor, she stepped out first, the corridor stretching before them like a tunnel. Something was different. The air was colder than it had been in the morning, not the kind of cold that seeped in from outside, but a still, stagnant chill that made the hairs on her arms rise. The sconces along the wall flickered as they walked, and she thought she caught a whiff of something faintly metallic beneath the scent of polish. When they reached room 13, the key resisted in the lock for a moment before turning. The door creaked open, and Emily felt a draft brush past her ankles, as if the room had been holding its breath until now. She noticed it immediately, a sound, faint, muffled, like someone crying far away. It seemed to be coming from beyond the balcony doors, though the thick curtains muffled it almost entirely. Ryan didn't react. "Do you hear that?" she asked. He glanced up from his bag. "Hear what?" "That sound." He tilted his head, listening for half a second. Nothing, probably the wind. But Emily knew the sound of wind, and this wasn't it. The rhythm was too human. Hitching, breathy, a sob that came in waves. She crossed to the balcony, hesitated, then parted the curtains just enough to peek through the glass. The fog outside had rolled in again, curling low along the street, the lamplight below barely cutting through. The balcony itself was empty. She let the curtain fall back into place. It sounded like... She trailed off. What was she going to say? Like someone was out there crying? Like a woman's voice calling for help? Ryan was already in the bathroom, the sound of running water filling the silence. She unpacked a little, folding clothes into the wardrobe. When she moved one of Ryan's shirts, something small and white fluttered to the carpet. A folded piece of paper. Her first thought was that it was a receipt, maybe from the airport. But when she picked it up, she saw the ink had bled slightly, as if it had gotten damp. She unfolded it slowly. 2 words, written in a shaky hand. "Don't stay." Emily's chest tightened. She turned it over. Nothing on the back. The paper was worn, as though it had been handled many times. She stared at it for a long moment, then slipped it into the drawer of the bedside table. Later, while Ryan showered, she sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone. A notification lit up his. It was sitting on the nightstand next to hers. She didn't want to look. She really didn't. But the name wasn't familiar, and the preview text, "Miss you already." Her fingers moved before her mind could stop them. She opened the message. Another followed. "Last night was amazing. When will I see you again?" Her stomach dropped. She scrolled up, each message worse than the last, confirming what she had feared in Boston but hadn't wanted to face. When Ryan came out of the bathroom, steam rolling into the bedroom, she was still holding the phone. "How long?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. He froze. "Emily. How long have you been lying to me?" The argument was sharp, voices rising and falling. Ryan swore it was a mistake, swore it didn't mean anything, but Emily's ears rang with the sound of her own heartbeat. She paced to the balcony, yanking the curtains open. The glass rattled in its frame. "You brought me here," she said, her voice breaking, "so you could what? Clear your conscience before going back to her." "It's not like that. Don't lie to me again." Her hand went to the balcony door handle. It was cold, almost numbingly so. The fog outside was thicker now, so dense it swallowed the street below. The railing glistened with rain. She stepped out into the damp night air, the city's sounds muffled beneath the heavy mist. Behind her, Ryan's voice was sharp, urgent. "Emily, come inside. Let's talk." She stood at the edge, her fingers curling around the wet metal of the railing, and then... She felt its cold, delicate hands resting lightly against her back. Not pushing, not pulling, just there. She turned her head slightly, but saw nothing in her peripheral vision. Ryan was still a few steps inside, his hands at his sides. The hands pressed, gently at first, then more firmly. The air seemed to whisper against her ear, words so faint she wasn't sure they were real. "It's already over." When she stepped onto the railing, the cold bit into her bare feet. Ryan shouted her name, the sound distant, muffled by the fog. The city lights below blurred into indistinct halos. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw someone standing in the street far below, looking up. A pale figure in white. Then she leaned forward and the world tipped away from her. The police were quick to arrive. The fog still clung to the street below Rose Hill Manor, curling around the flashing blue lights of the emergency vehicles. Guests gathered in the lobby, whispering, their faces pale in the firelight. Ryan sat in a chair near the fireplace, a wool blanket draped over his shoulders. His hair was still damp from the shower, his expression vacant. A police officer asked him questions: where he'd been, what had happened, whether Emily had said anything before she climbed over the railing. He answered mechanically. We argued. She was upset. I didn't think she'd actually. He trailed off, rubbing at his eyes. The body had already been taken away by the time the fog began to lift. By morning, Ryan was gone. He checked out quietly, avoiding the other guests, his departure noted only by the bored concierge at the desk. But room 13 remained. 2 weeks later, the room was rented to a pair of newlyweds from Manchester. They arrived late, giddy from wine and the novelty of their honeymoon. The receptionist handed them the key without hesitation. A newer clerk who didn't know the history. That night, around 3 a.m, the bride woke to the sound of someone crying. At first, she thought it was her husband, but when she turned toward him, he was fast asleep, his back to her. The sound was coming from the balcony. She rose, the carpet cool under her bare feet, and crossed to the curtains. She hesitated, hand poised to part them. The sobbing stopped. When she pulled the curtains aside, the balcony was empty. But there, in the reflection of the glass, she thought she saw another woman standing behind her in the room. A pale, dripping figure with hollow eyes. The bride screamed, waking her husband. He rushed to her side, but by the time he looked, the reflection was gone. They checked out before dawn. Over the next month, room 13 became a quiet problem for management. Guests complained of disturbances. Whispering voices, icy drafts, shadows that moved against the grain of the light. One housekeeper refused to enter after finding the balcony door unlocked 3 mornings in a row, despite having locked it herself each time. Another claimed she heard a woman's voice when the room was empty. Don't trust him, he's lying to you. By the 3rd complaint, the manager, Mr. Alden, decided to keep the room vacant for a while, but hotels do not make money on locked doors. Eventually, the decision was made to try again. In late spring, a young couple from New York checked in. Their reservation had been misplaced, and the only available room was 13. They laughed when they heard the number. Unlucky in the States, the husband said, but we're not superstitious. That night, the wife woke to find herself standing on the balcony railing. The fog was thick, the street below invisible. She had no memory of getting out of bed, but her body swayed slightly, as if something was urging her forward. Behind her, she felt hands, cold, steady hands pressing against her back. Her husband's shouts broke the trance. He pulled her down, trembling, insisting she had been sleepwalking. But when she described the hands, he went pale. They left before breakfast. By summer, the pattern was clear. Couples could not stay in room 13 without incident. The disturbances were always directed toward the woman, never the man, and always carried the same thread of suspicion, of whispered warnings about betrayal. Finally, Mr. Alden ordered the door locked permanently. The number plate was removed, the wood painted to match the wall. The hallway now jumped from room 12 to room 14, and staff were instructed to say it had always been that way. The key to room 13 was placed in a small box in the manager's office and forgotten. In November, a dense fog returned to London. The city seemed quieter, muted under the gray shroud. That week, an American man named Daniel Brooks checked into Rose Hill Manor. He was traveling alone, a week's holiday before returning to Boston. When he reached the front desk, the receptionist frowned at the screen. That's odd. You're in room 13. Daniel glanced at the key. Is that a problem? The clerk hesitated. We don't have a room 13. But when Daniel took the lift to the top floor, there it was, at the far end of the corridor, brass numbers gleaming. The air inside was still and cold. The bed was neatly made, though the fabric smelled faintly of damp. Heavy curtains covered the balcony doors, and the wardrobe stood open, a single empty hanger swaying slightly. Daniel unpacked, set his suitcase by the bed, and took out his laptop. He was halfway through checking emails when he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sobbing. He froze, listening. It came from the balcony. Hello, he called. The sobbing stopped. He parted the curtains. The fog outside was so thick he couldn't see the railing. He leaned closer to the glass, his breath fogging the pain. From behind him, a woman's voice said, "Oh, you're early. I was expecting you with someone else." Daniel turned sharply. In the corner of the room stood a woman in a white nightgown, her hair damp, Her eyes dark and sunken, he stared. "I'm actually here alone." Her lips curled into a faint smile. "Not anymore." The next morning, the maid knocked on room 13 to begin cleaning. No answer. When she tried her key, it slid into empty air. The door was gone. In its place was a smooth stretch of painted wall. No seam, no handle, no brass number. Down in the manager's office, Mr. Alden checked the booking system. There was no record of Daniel Brooks ever having stayed at Rose Hill Manor. And yet, in the key box, the brass tag marked 13 was missing. To this day, the top-floor hallway of Rose Hill Manor jumps from room 12 to room 14. Most guests pass by without noticing. But on foggy nights, when the corridor is empty and the sconces flicker, some say you can hear the faint sound of a woman crying at the far end. And if you walk toward the sound, you might see a door where there shouldn't be one. If you knock, the crying will stop. And a voice, low, close, almost in your ear, will say, "Come in, I've been waiting for you." Thanks for listening. Hit the like button if you really like this story, and don't forget to subscribe.